friends, my name is Marines, and today I'm going to be talking about audiences and community and the places where online meets offline. I didn't really get around to announcing it on this channel, but I was actually invited to be part of the BookTube panel at VidCon 2017. It was my first time being on a panel, and I was just super honored to have been thought of and to have been asked to participate. But it was a fun experience and one that I felt went pretty well, all said and done. You guys know how many feelings I have about all of the things, and this experience was no different. I attended my very first VidCon in 2015, and that was just about 4 months after I launched this channel. Now, it's not my intention to shade anyone, and this is not an open invitation to guess who I'm talking about, but I think it's important to share my experiences because it forms the basis of this conversation that I want to have with you all. At VidCon 2015, I would say that one of my biggest disappointments was how I was sometimes treated by other creators. For the most part, people were nice to me, but I also experienced a lot of feelings that I just wasn't expecting to feel, including condescended to. I think in a lot of ways, for me to be there as a new creator, it really aggravated some of the insecurities that I was having about this channel anyway. At that time especially, I was already feeling older than most people and more critical than most people and browner than most of the people that I was seeing. I think it's an experience that other people share just as you or just after you step into this community where you feel like you don't exactly fit. It's an offshoot of having this kind of defined community that you know you want to be a part of, but still knowing that you also want to bring your individual self into that community as well. I didn't attend VidCon in 2016 because of some previously planned travel, so it was kind of surreal to be invited to attend and participate on a panel in 2017. I don't mean this to be boastful because I know a lot of me being able to participate was me having the privilege of being able to fly myself and fund myself to participate, but it was still, like I said, surreal that I was there in 1 year and I didn't even feel like I had a place in the community, and then I was able to attend again and I had an actual literal place at the BookTube panel. Still though, I will say that I came away from a mostly positive experience with a lot of thoughts about community and audiences and how we engage. I started preparing this video and I had the idea to kind of frame it by asking you guys if you had any questions about communities and kind of this offline online thing, and just taking your points and your questions and forming my own discussion around it. So I took to Twitter and I asked you guys what kind of things you wanted me to talk about or address in this video. This question was submitted anonymously and it says, I think discussing what we call one another would be interesting in this large reading community. By that I mean the difference in calling people viewers, subscribers, booktubers, fans, book community, audience, internet friends, etc. I think this is a phenomenal question and one that cuts to the quick of what I wanted to open up as a discussion in this video. I ran a quick Twitter poll about this to just kind of gauge levels, and 59% of the people who voted said that they would call the people who watch their videos viewers or subscribers. 22% said community, 17% said friends, and only 2% said fan. There are several things to touch on here. First off, during the Engaging Your Audience panel at VidCon, I heard Super Sam Stuff answer a question about growing your audience, and he ended it with a question about what your goals were, whether it was truly to grow your audience in number or whether it was to grow and foster a community. I think that is a super defining question, but I also don't think that there is a wrong answer. Like, if your honest to goodness answer is that you want to grow your numbers and get famous and get that AdSense money, like, you know, high five, work. That content that you're producing might not be for everybody, but I'm sure that it would find an audience. If you're out here because you want to grow a community and answer comments and engage and watch other people's videos and spark conversation, that's amazing too, and that has always been my personal goal. There is overlap though, because as much as I want to grow my community, I want to grow. I want to reach people, and as much as numbers don't matter, they kind of matter. I don't ever have numbers that I'm specifically looking at, but I do look at growth, and I always want to keep growing because I feel like that is a marker of health. if that makes sense. Like, I feel my channel is doing well if people are continuing to find it and like it and my channel is growing. That's probably oversimplification of what channel growth really is, but there is a part of me that really does want to see the progress, even if I'm not putting so much weight in specific numbers. The issue, I think, is that there are some methods of growing your audience that aren't necessarily conducive to fostering community, and sometimes it can feel like the more time that you invest in fostering community is time that you're taking away from other methods of growing your audience. Secondly, as I talk to people about this on Twitter, we came to the conclusion that there's nothing wrong with being a fan, and yet so many of us bristled at the idea of calling our viewers fans. I think this is for several reasons. A, because it feels presumptuous. B, because it feels impersonal. And C, because I think it speaks to an imbalance of power between creator and receiver. It's one thing to think of yourself as a fan of someone or something that is especially kind of unattainable or far away from you, and it's another thing to be assumed to be a fan of like a bookish Joe Schmo who you engage with and talk to and exchange ideas with, and who has a part in contributing to what you are making. And thirdly, I think that more than how people who create videos address their viewers, there's sometimes an issue of how people who create videos treat their viewers. Going back to my first offline experience meeting people from this community, it really was so jarring to be treated like a fan, which is to say in that kind of impersonal way. It would be easy for me to say that I felt this way because I was a fellow creator, but also there are so many important members of this community who are also readers who literally keep this place afloat with their views and their comments and how they engage with us and exchange ideas and opinions. I think it's so presumptuous to treat anyone in that manner, regardless of whether you know them as a fellow creator or not. Another wonderful suggested topic came from @Brime, who is a wonderful person and you should all be following her on Twitter, and she asked about boundaries. Now this is the tricky part because in addition to everything that I just said, I can also stand here and say that as sucky as it is to be treated in that kind of impersonal and arm's length manner, I also feel like that there are people who do that in order to set up boundaries. I've seen a lot of complaints specifically on BookTube about clicks and cliquish behavior, and I more or less see where that's coming from because you could probably pick any moderately known creator and name 3 or 4 of their closest in-community friends. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing though, because there is a difference between having a closed-off community and having a community and closer ties in that community. I think it's the equivalent of being nice to all of your neighbors, but having more in common with one over the other, and you're still nice to everybody and you're still all neighbors, but you form closer ties with certain people. That's natural, and I wouldn't expect everyone here to like me, and I even expect that some people may like my videos but wouldn't want to hang out with me on the weekend or share a room with me at an event, and that's fine. It's a very delicate balancing act, I think, managing to seem warm and open and inviting, as I'm sure all of us want to be, but still maintaining those boundaries that you feel comfortable with and safe with. Like, let's meet, let's talk, and heck, if you're a hugger, I'm gonna hug you because I'm a hugger, but I'm not going to invite myself to your room because boundaries. The way that I see these offline events, if there is a BookTube meetup, I should be welcome there. If we engage online but you're having a dinner with 5 of your closest friends, my invitation there is not a given. I think it must be difficult for people who grow big enough that they then become the faces of BookTube or any community that they participate in. And we see them during other moments, granted, because they're probably shared on social media, and we think there is BookTube doing BookTube things without me, when it may in fact be there are people doing like personal friend things that they're entitled to, and that's okay. Emma, who is @Emmers and whose channel I will link, asked, when does community become audience? And what does that difference look like in real life? We've talked about that first part a little bit and about the engagement and active participation that is implied in community. And what does that difference look like in real life? Well, I can only share my own experience. The first year was at VidCon. I met Max from Well Done Books, and he saw me and he thought I looked a little bit familiar, so he came over and he introduced himself, and once he heard my name, he kind of was able to pinpoint what video of mine he saw, and then we talked for 5 to 10 minutes, and even though we're both on the quieter side in real life, and he just was very, very nice to me, and obviously that is a moment that has stuck with me. The fact that somebody who was a bigger name in our community just saw me, came up to me, talked to me, engaged, and listened to what I had to say, that kind of interaction is what I see as somebody who values community. There's another creator, which again, I'm not asking you to guess because I'm not saying their name for a purpose and I'm not going to say it, but it's a person that I've met 4 or 5 times at different bookish events, and every single time I've encountered them, they've introduced themselves to me. They've reintroduced themselves to me. To me, that is a great example of meeting somebody in real life that has no interest in community. I also personally think that it's really obvious as you talk to people who is engaged in the community, like, do they know what's going on? Can they name other creators, or do they watch videos other than their own? A really good way to kind of measure that is just to ask for some recommendations and see who they're watching and if they're watching and what they name. The next question is from Bianca at Bianca Lynn Books, and she asked, what are your personal expectations of a BookTube community member versus an audience member? Do you expect more support, engagement, etc. from one versus the other? I'll also say that Proud Book Lion and Laura from Bookies and Cookies also asked questions about the blurred lines between audience member and creator. Specifically, since people who watch our videos are in the reading community. I personally don't expect much of a difference. I mean, there is kind of a shared experience between people who make things, and I think a lot of times that's what kind of draws creator to creator, is because of that shared experience and just kind of, you know, commiserating over this wild thing that we do when we stand in front of a camera and talk to ourselves, but to like lots of other different people, and just the experience of editing and editing yourself and your face and how strange that is, and uploading, and just the entire creative process, as well as the process, all the mechanics of it, I think form a basis of connection between creators, and I think that's kind of natural for a shared hobby. But as far as engagement and support, I don't know that I have different expectations for one versus the other. I do know that it can be very difficult to make things, to set aside time to make things, but also to make sure that you're setting aside time to engage. What happens to me is that if I don't have time to watch others and engage and comment, I'll stop creating. I'll feel disconnected from the community, and if I don't have time to engage 100%, I don't feel good about just posting videos and kind of leaving them up here without my presence to like reply to comments and then to go on and watch what you guys are all making. So I don't know that it's tough to say what the expectation is from creators in terms of engagement. I can only speak to what my own expectations of myself, and that is that if I'm posting, I'm also engaging. That was a little bit rambly, but the point is that I think expectations for viewers versus creators probably differs from person to person. My very good friend Nicole Sweeney, whose channel I will also link, asked a question about how these ideas of community versus audience inform how you make things and what you make, and I just love this question to pieces. It reminded me that she actually made a great video about context collapse. She goes into this whole idea, this concept of context collapse, and this idea of who we address when we make these kinds of things. She talks very specifically about how in order to create things, she has to imagine herself kind of talking to her friends. I think that who you're talking to when you talk changes absolutely from person to person. So there are probably people who have to imagine that nobody's gonna watch what they're making, or people who really address like specific groups of people, or like, you know, maybe you pretend you're talking to your mom. I don't know what your method is. Now, I think that for some people you do maybe have to bring that a little smaller and imagine yourself talking to friends or talking to a specific person in order to make this thing a thing that you can do. That said, in one of my very first college classes, it was a creative writing class that focused on poetry. We read from Ted Kooser's Poetry Home Repair Manual, and in that book he talks about this idea of creating for yourself. Now, this is again a tricky area, which is why this is more of a discussion than I'd like me having answers, because I think that there are some times where the idea of just do it for yourself really comes into play. I think you can over focus on who you're creating for, and I think we see this a lot when people want to, you know, become more creative with their content, or they want to change a certain thing up, or the thing that they're making doesn't make them happy anymore. if you over focus on your audience, you can fall into a trap of where you're making things where you're not happy with them anymore, and that is certainly not the right answer. But Ted Kosior says in this book that you never truly make things for yourself if you're sharing them with an audience. Things you make for yourself are like a grocery list and writing in your journal. If you're posting something, if you're sharing it with an audience, you have effectively made it for that audience. And considering the things you make in that way, he talks about considering your audience to a certain degree, and I think that's always how I make content. I always do it with a community in mind. Yes, it's stuff I want to make and it's stuff I'm happy with and that I enjoy making, but if I'm going to share it with people, I'm going to have those people in mind. Again, I can just share my own personal things, but when I'm making things, I always think about, is this clear? Is it concise? Can people understand? Did I express myself well? And then also, is there anything here that people can engage with? Did I ask a question? Did I invite them to chat with me? Did I do something that kind of expands this from a me talking to people thing to them also talking back to me kind of thing? And that's really how I think about my videos when I make them and I frame them. So I guess what I would say at the end of the day is think of your community when you're creating your content, but don't let an audience dictate what your content is. Final thing that I want to touch on is this idea that to engage at a certain level within this community, that you have to take these interactions offline. I'll be completely honest here and say that I have had some amazing time at some of these events, and I've cemented some friendships because we had the opportunity to meet and have dinner and share things over drinks. It's great, and if you are a person who can and who wants to, I would highly recommend the experience, because even if I've had some negative encounters, for the most part they have been mostly positive. The other side of it though, for those of you who can't do these events, is to remember that the things that you see on social media or the things that are like super cut together in a 5-minute vlog aren't the full stories. No one snaps a picture at the end of the day when your feet hurt and your makeup smeared and oh my god, everybody stop talking because it's sleep time. Nobody talks about the fact that these things that you see on social media and the things that we share, the pictures we take, the vlogs that we make, kind of are give and take because they're time taken away from the event itself. You've now effectively paid for the event or paid to get yourself to the event, but you're missing event things to document the event for social media. It's a curated version of fun. And again, not to say that they are not fun, because I enjoy them and I keep going to these events and I recommend them to anybody who can do them, but I think it helps to keep in mind that you are viewing this all through a lens, especially when you start to feel separated from the action. Your way that you can engage in this community is valid, and your interactions with people, even if they are solely online, are also valid. I'm just super excited to hear all of your thoughts about the million things that I mentioned in this video, and I have a feeling, I haven't edited this yet, but I have a feeling I have to apologize for it being long. If you guys have thoughts, if you guys have ideas, if you guys want to talk a little bit more about any of the things that I mentioned, let's go down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. And yeah. On one level, I will say that it went really well, and that was that I didn't like trip and fall on my face, because that was legit a worry of mine.